welcome to the Habits to Goals podcast with Martin Grunberg. It's time to take control of your life. Are you ready to achieve goals faster and more consistently than ever before? You need the habit factor. You're listening to Habits to Goals, the podcast that helps you create the habits that lead to success. And here is Martin Grunberg.
Alrighty, here we go. Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Martin Grunberg. You have reached Habits to Goals. Today's FAF is it's a fantastic FAF, a fantastic frequently asked Friday. It really is, because it's a topic near and dear to my heart, far more so today than, I don't know, say 5 years ago, 10 years ago. The question is simply, what is the best way to meditate? And I'm not going to necessarily answer the best way. I'm going to address this in a couple fashions, if you will, from a couple directions. The first is, again, this is all just from my experience. The first is to do it, right? To actually begin. And with that, I would say I would highly recommend creating a log, either using the free app or use a Google sheet or use a spreadsheet, but track it. It is a practice. So the best way is to do it. A lot of people think about it. A lot of people know they should. A lot of people talk about it. A lot of people say they do it. But just do it, and probably don't talk about it. Just because this leads to tip number 2. So tip number 1 is Nike. Just do it. Tip number 2, with tracking, of course. Tip number 2 is experiment. Don't be caught up in if you're doing it right, if you're doing it wrong. Should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? Should I sit this way? Just experiment. The basis is, and I bring it all back to like a Blaise Pascal quote, all men's miseries, all persons' miseries derive or arise from their inability. So this is an extreme. If you took it literally, it's an extreme statement. All of our miseries derive from our inability to sit with ourselves quietly in a room. I don't know if actually room is on that. All of man's miseries arise from their inability to sit with themselves quietly. And again, if you, just for fun, took that literally, like all of man's miseries, all people's miseries, like everything, arguments, wars, murder, stealing, not healthy relationships, just for fun, just from the inability to sit with themselves quietly. And so, like I said, just for fun, I kind of, that stuck with me, I don't know, 20 plus years ago. And I've heard a lot of people say they cannot sit still. And by the way, that's okay. Again, experiment. You may find that you're stretching. They don't want to close your eyes. You don't have to close your eyes. So I will share from my experience. So I think that answers it. If you could just experiment and track it, you'd be ahead of, 90% of the population. But going a bit further, So for the first time ever, and I think it was at the beginning of, actually it was around April, right after I interviewed our man, Fred Gratson, The Lazy Way to Success, I began to take this extremely seriously in the sense of the tracking. And so the first mistake I made, and you've heard me say this, is I was trying to be expedient. In other words, so 15 plus years ago I started, and the goal was 20 minutes, and I felt like, hey, after 15 minutes I'm good, and then it was 12, and then it was 10, and then it was 8, and 6, and 4, and 2. And the answer, incredibly, was even after 2 minutes, it was absolutely beneficial. But the problem was, and what I didn't see or understand, was I was just trying to be, I'm using the air quotes, efficient with my meditation. That all changed with the insight from a meditation that if if 2 minutes is good or 20 minutes is good, what would happen at 40 minutes or an hour? And then people are like, whoa, holy, slow down there, cowboy. We don't even have 10 minutes to sit still. And so I would challenge that slightly and say, you're spending at least an hour in front of the TV or browsing the internet. So I would submit to you, you absolutely have an hour. But I'm also suggesting you don't start there. So the best way is to begin. The second hot tip from my experience is to experiment. So a few insights that came to me, I found that as much as I love silence, and silence is, I almost said silence is golden. I love silence. But 6 months-ish ago, I would have Pandora in the background, and I'd have like a meditation channel on Pandora or a Zen channel. And then one day, it was the craziest thing. You've probably heard me share this story. I've shared it in bits and pieces. An Indian song came on as I was meditating, and I like leaped up because it was so amazing. I'm like, what is that? And then I ran over and I saw it was, and at the time, I didn't even know what a sitar really was. So I'm like, this is incredible. I wonder, one of the dumber things I've ever done, I wonder if there's a channel with just this music. And so I type in like Indian, and of course there's a few and they all have a billion listeners. So very popular channel. And I found an Indian classical channel. And so the comment here is around experimenting. So I love, and the beauty is a lot of these songs are 20 plus minutes. So I'll have that on in the background, and I'm usually sitting on a little towel, and then sometimes I'll stretch. The point is, it took another few months, and this is, so few months of daily logging, and then incredibly, I'm talking about years and years later, it occurred to me I should have my journal, like my little moleskin next to me. And now I have, and this is all experimenting, it's brilliant because if the mind is for creating ideas and it's not for holding them, and you're trying to empty the mind, well, the last thing I want to do is think of something and then just sit there and hope I don't forget it. So I have this little journal and scribble, especially if I'm sitting there for an hour, I'm jotting things down, and it's perfect, empties the mind. But it's incredible that it took that long to realize that. So I have my XP journal, the Habit Factors XP, I should mention. And what's incredible about that is, so it's called Habit XP, but there's a section about mantras, and some of the ones part of the experimenting. So I'm I don't want to blur this too much. So there's the Habit XP journal, and the foundation of that was Emerson's observation that all life is an experiment. What I'm finding is that has been super helpful with the meditation, because there are several pages dedicated to these mantras or these sayings, and some of them are just so great for meditation. For instance, sitting peacefully. This is just something you say in your head. It's not even aloud, or isn't with me. Maybe it is with you. Sitting peacefully, doing nothing. Spring comes and the grass grows all by itself. Sitting peacefully, doing nothing. Spring comes and the grass grows all by itself. And I'm like, wow, that's awesome. So I got that there. Muddied waters left to stand become clear. We were just talking about if all our miseries derive from our inability to sit still, well, stillness brings clarity, right? Muddied waters left to stand become clear. So I have my Habit XP journal there. I'm jotting stuff down. I got my moleskin over here, so ideas, things I need to do for the day. And the point is, again, more experimenting. So I got the music. Sometimes I'm stretching, and I'm not tied to any specific practice, any dogma. It's just an experiment. And that, my friends, because I don't want this to get too long and I kind of got to get out of here, that is the best way, from my experience, to meditate, is to A, do it, which includes tracking, and experiment. Stay consistent, write down, try things, and regard it, I guess this is the final thought, as I just did a long 2-part blog post on this idea of practice. And if you haven't read that, I recommend you do, because what you end up ultimately realizing, there's a great French proverb that says, life is half spent before one realizes what it is. And what I've realized it is in many forms and fashion, is one long, elongated, so to speak, practice. So everything in some form or fashion is a practice. And what I'm getting at is, it's not something you're going to do once. It's not something you're going to do for a week. It's not something you're going to do for a month. It's not something you're going to do for a year. It's a practice. We talked about impatience already, so we won't go there. All right, so that's your FAF. A lot kind of covered, and I cannot recommend the practice of meditation enough. I just think you ought to experiment. Do not try to be expedient, and feel free to keep a little journal next to you, and let me know how the Indian classical music channel goes for you. I'd love to hear your feedback. On that note, please leave a review, give the show a rating. This really helps. How iTunes sees the show, and they rate it better, and they promote it, and all sorts of fun stuff, which helps us serve more people. All right, my friends, with that, I am out. You are terrific. Go get them, stay after it, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Habits to Goals. Peace. Hey, really quick, I just want to remind you, if you want to grab your habits and goals tracking template, the template that started it all, you can get that really quickly. Just text me at 33444 and simply text the word habits. That is habits, HABITS,
to 33444 and you will get the tracking template immediately. All right. Thank you so much for listening to the show. Thanks for dropping a quick review. It'll take you less than 30 seconds if you're getting value. I'm out.